So this is a shot of what we think maybe Babylon looked like, and then some hydroponics that are in greenhouses here in one form or another. There are so many different forms that it can take. So hydroponics is cultivation of plants by placing the roots in liquid nutrient solutions rather than in soil. So it's soilless, and that's what the plants grow in. So the basic components of soil are sand, silt, and clay. Those three elements. Organic matter is not soil. Organic matter is organic matter. Glass pebbles are not really soil. So clay pebbles, kind of, clay is a soil, but these are hard clay pebbles. So anyway, we use different substrates in the media to hold the plant in place. And one of the keen things that we use is a thing called rock wool. Usually we use that to grow plants in. So rock wool is kind of like you would think of like a spun glass, like you have insulation in your home. So none of this involves a real soil. So when we're doing hydroponics, we have to add everything to that. So it must have been very interesting back in either Babylon or in the right picture that's the Aztecs growing these hydroponic gardens. And they were various, like I said, different forms, but I wonder who was in charge of nutrition and determining whether there was enough nutrition in the soil, because I don't think they had soil labs to send things to that could be analyzed for that. Um, Basically, hydroponic principles began in 600 BC. That's our first actual recorded. So they could have happened way before that, but an actual recorded, like here it is, hydroponics was, we have a record of 600 BC in the Gardens of Babylon. Like I said, we don't know exactly how they looked or exactly what was grown there, whether it was pleasure gardens or whether it was vegetables and fruits, or it was a combination of all of them. But I'm sure it probably was interesting for them to get such merit and note that we know about it today. Back in the Common Era, or AD, 900 to 1000 AD, we have the records of the floating gardens of the Aztecs in Lake Tenochtitlan. And so those were famous and well known, I'm sure, to the Aztecs and people there for raising food and flowers. Parts of it still exist if you go down to Mexico City in that area. You can still find the floating gardens there, and there's been some programs on PBS of how they're built and how they stack mud. So they're actually using real soil in it and with reeds and mesh together, and they kind of anchor these islands in the lake, and they do produce food on there, and quite effectively. But the hydroponics that we're going to talk about doesn't use any kind of soil within them. Let's see. Then Marco Polo records sightings of floating gardens in China in the 1200s. By the 1620s, Francis Bacon, who's a British scientist, studied soilless gardening. And that's kind of set research on hydroponics into motion. Then John Woodward, a British scientist, includes plants grow better in water with nutrients, not just in water. So we can grow plants in water for a time, but if there's not any nutrition, the plants tend to suffer. So as that plant tries to put on more growth, if there's not enough nutrition in that water, it may grow, but it'll get weaker and weaker as it grows because that nutrition gets spread out over a longer plant that's getting larger. So it's like dilution. And then the Berkeley scientists in the 1930s demonstrate the benefit of soilless gardening and giving hydroponics its name. And then by 1938, these two people, Berkeley scientists Dennis Hoagland and Daniel Arnon, published the water culture method of growing plants without soil. And that was one of the most important texts to come out at that time. And it's hard to think it hasn't even been 100 years since that happened. But as I mentioned, if you think about it going way back, hydroponics has been around for a very, very long time. It's just finally got a name to it in the 1930s. Now we look at 6 different types of hydroponics. we have a wicking system. And sometimes if you go to a store, I know in the past you were able to buy like a little vial and it had a little tiny plant in there with a string that went into water in the bottom. And you'd have like a little poinsettia or a kalanchoe, and that string kind of soaked up water and took it up to the roots. And that was through capillary action. So that was a wicking system. Here we have ebb and flow in a number of different greenhouses. So it's got a pump that pumps water up to a strata, and these are like clay beads. And they kind of hold water and provide support for the plant to put its roots out and hang on to. Again, they all have nutrient solutions. So the blue part on the bottom is a nutrient solution. Nutrient flow technique top right is where the pump pumps water up and the tray is at a slight angle and the water rushes through on a time basis. It can go continuous all day long, or it can go at periodic ebb and flow or periodic running times. And that waters the roots and keeps them moist from drying out. So you got to have the timing correct. Water culture is the main one we're going to talk about today. So that's what I've been using in the school system. And we sent out a publication that we're getting worked on to get online more. So that is a good resource for schools to use in hydroponic systems. Then there was drip. So I worked with a drip system when I worked in the greenhouse industry. And that's where you have water pumped up through a pipe, and then there's like micro tubing that goes to each plant, and each plant gets a certain amount of water for a certain length of time. And then that water drains through the bottom of the pot. It's collected, goes back to the main water source, and can be repumped through the system again. And then the final one is an aeroponics. And that's where the plants are basically out in the air, and you have like a misting system. So you have a water reservoir at the bottom, and it spritzes water, kind of like if you poured soda pop into a glass. And if you put your face down there right after you pour it, it's spritzing little bubbles and that up the top. Well, this spritzes water, and that's how it keeps the roots moist, by spraying a fine droplets onto those roots so that they don't dry out. Now, I worked, I want to say, with in the greenhouse system with ebb and flow, nutrient film, and drip. Those were the three ones we used mainly in greenhouse production. And then developed for the school system, what we call the water culture, because it was the easiest system to employ into the school. The other systems can be expensive. So, we tried to take a cheaper approach to finding a system that would work in the schools and not cost a whole lot of money. The pros for doing this are smaller space for growing. You can get more plants in an area, less growing time required, easy to fulfill since no special skills are needed, and you can forget about weeding, fertilizing, and digging. So once you have everything set in place, don't mistake me on the fertilizing. You don't have to fertilize on a regular basis. You need to set your fertilizer once or twice throughout the system and just kind of monitor it, but you don't have to be out there like in a using fertilizers out in the field. It's mixed in the nutrient solution. Less infection possibilities. All nutrients are recyclable. That's a little bit difficult to say because I worked with a system like that. And as you reuse that water over and over again, certain nutrients get used up by the plants. So you have to periodically consider changing that nutrient solution, because you lose nitrogen as one of the ingredients in there, because the plants will take that up quite easily. Better quality of growing plants. So you can grow a lot of times better, faster, larger plants. You don't have to worry about the environment. So depending on where you're at, we're kind of talking about backyard gardening with hydroponics, and we'll get into that. But a lot of the hydroponics in the world are actually grown in greenhouses or undercover. So they have protection from wind and hail and snow and damage from all kinds of weather elements. So this is an easy system that can be done in a house. Higher yield since you don't have to take care of rotating crops. Um, Accurate nutrient level, so you're very precise. Every plant gets the same amount of nutrition because you've measured it out in the water. And it can save a lot of money because you're growing plants in a more confined area at a quicker rate. Some of the disadvantages are rather high initial setup cost. So for some of these systems, it costs a lot of money to build all kinds of equipment like pumps and boxes to have them in, and putting all the plastic recycling tubes in there and everything else that it takes. So some of that can cost a lot more, and sometimes lighting can lead into money depending on how big the system is. In order to get successful results, growers should have at least some basic knowledge of growing skills. So, if you come in there totally without ever growing a plant and knowing what to do, it can be very intimidating. So it seems like weird science or mad science, and when you're looking at it, but it's pretty easy. We're working with a lot of schools around the state, and that's the publication. So we're working with hydroponics in the schools, and the kids are picking up pretty fast, and the teachers say, some of them say it was intimidating at first. It seemed, very complicated. Then they said after a little while, it was so simple to use. Um, it just was pretty straightforward. You just follow certain specifics, uh, and then everything is great. But if you make mistakes, mistakes can be catastrophic in a sense, because if you get water, your water becomes infected with a disease, all your plants can die. But if you have nutrient solutions in different sections, you may lose one area, but you don't lose like a whole field of crops sometimes that you can do in real life. So they all share the same nutrient mix, but they also share the same disease problems, and that can spread very fast. Um, Sometimes hot weather and limited oxygen influence production negatively, and it may lead to a drop in crop yields. Yeah, if your water gets too hot, the oxygenation goes out of the water. So you can't just have a bucket of water sitting there, because I think we all know if you put a plant, let's say if you throw a leaf of lettuce into a pot of water on a hot day and leave it, it's going to start decomposing, and then it leads to rot. So oxygen goes out of water, it can go pretty quickly. You can see if you've ever had tropical fish or goldfish, if you don't change the water, the fish is going to run out of air in that water, and then it will die, and then the water becomes putrid. And the same thing happens with hydroponics crops. If you don't pay attention, things can go wrong. So what we developed for hydroponics was an aeration system. So that's important. So you got to figure out how you're going to aerate your water that you're cycling around. Either, like you look at some of the ponds, sometimes people do, they spray the water up into the air, and that helps keep oxygen in the water. In our case, what we did was get some oxygen pumps like you would put in an aquarium, and put a stone at the end, an air stone. So that creates the bubbles in the water, and that we keep going 24 hours a day. And that helps keep the water oxygenated so that the roots can breathe in that water and take up the nutrients, and things seem to flow in the right direction. Without that, you risk putrefaction of the roots and die off. So here's a chart that shows visual symptoms of nutrient disorders. So you can send plants off to a lab to have them tested to be more accurate on what nutrients are needed in that plant. And then you can monitor the water. If you're on a big scale, like you're producing a lot of vegetables, let's say for a farmer's market, then you need to know what's in your water. So you may want to do periodic testing of your water to ensure that you have the right nutrition there for the vegetables you're growing, so that you optimize that for production and for the growth of the plant, so that you make more money at the market. If you don't pay attention, then nutrients go off. And if you say, oh, well, I think in my head, you don't know, but I go, I think it needs more nitrogen, or I think my neighbor told me it needs more iron or whatever. You don't know for sure. And the one thing about nutrition, and it's the same in human or animals, your cats, dogs, horses, anything, or vegetables and people, if you offset nutrition, let's say you give a plant a lot of nitrogen, well, it'll make it grow, but then what happens? You offset other elements. So then it's growing faster than it can take up micronutrients or phosphorus or potassium or zinc, and you get out of balance. So anytime you think of your own personal body or your pets or animals or plants, it's all about balance. Having that balance of daily nutrition for the plant, animal, whatever, and keeping that in balance, because when things get out of balance is when things start to go wrong and you have more problems with disease and abiotic problems like that. So this is a basic chart. Sometimes if you see things like this going on, then like here on the left, a leaf purpling. The leaves are turning purple. Well, they shouldn't be purple unless they were meant to be purple, like purple leaf lettuce. That's supposed to be like that. But if they're supposed to be green and they're turning purplish, you may have a phosphorus deficiency. But the only way to know is to do a real test. And it takes some time and skill to be able to see these problems go on. But you can develop them. And the better nutrition that your plants have, the better nutrition when you eat them, you're going to have. And plants, just so everybody knows, whether it's organic or whether it's non-organic, the plant can only take up inorganic forms of nutrition. So that element like iron or nitrogen has to be in an inorganic form for the plant to take it up. You could put down organics like outside in your garden, but that has to be mineralized. So it's made into a mineral and dissolvable in water for the plant to take it up. So the plant doesn't care which way it gets nutrition, inorganic or organic, just so it's getting the right nutrition. Thing with organic, it usually takes longer for uptake. The thing with hydroponics is generally you can buy the nutritions, and those are already dissolved in water, so they're immediately available to the plant. So that's why it's like really important to follow the directions to get it right, because if you put too much nutrition down, that's not good either. It's like taking too many vitamins, it will kill the plant. Or too little nutrition, it'll suffer in its growth and it won't grow very well. So you won't get your results. Again, here's a look at, on the left, you have aquaponics. That's with fish. And then you recycle the fish waste up into the plants. Anybody know what the trouble with that is? So the main problem with that system is keeping the fish alive or the plants alive, because you have to have enough fish to produce enough waste to fertilize the plants. On the other hand, if you do that, then you may not have enough oxygen. The water can quickly go bad and the fish die. So it's a much more difficult system than having the system separated and just growing plants in hydroponics. The picture on the right, this is just a bucket of one plant, but we can do several. You can do multiple plants. I'll be showing you that in a little bit. But the basic with one plant, you have a basket that holds the plant in place, because if you didn't and it dropped down the water, it would just drown basically, because from the base of the plant down, that's meant to be in soil, and from the base up, it's meant to be in the air. And those tissues that develop above it are not adapted to a airless environment, so to speak. So they're more prone to rotting if you put them underwater or under soil. So any kind of plant, if you plant it too deep, that's kind of what happens to it. So there you go there. So the air pump, like I said, is very important to keep that air in there. And if the air is in your hydroponic system and the water level stays relatively stable and it's not infected, you could go months at a time with growing plants and not have a problem. But you have to still pay attention. Here's some pictures of some different growing. There's one outside on the bottom left. which shows some hydroponics units. And these are basic totes that you can buy at Walmart or any, kind of hardware store type thing, and make totes out of this and drill, or they're already totes, but drill holes in the top, make hydroponic systems out of it. And that's contained in that book that hopefully you got. You can build more elaborate PVC piping and stack them. One of the things I'll say about hydroponics, it was mainly designed to grow lettuce. Of all the vegetables that you produce, lettuce is going to be your most successful crop. So lettuce is probably one of the most perishable next to strawberries, but it has the fastest turnaround, and it grows the fastest, and it's easiest to do in one of these container gardens like this. So high points to lettuce, and that includes not just the lettuce, but spinach, kale, broccoli, different things like that. So if you were doing a container like this, you notice on the pipes in the top left, you want to kind of stick with all one kind of plant. So the top left shows basically all kinds of lettuce and leafy type plants, because they all have the similar growth habit, the same size. If you were to mix tomatoes in that with leafy greens, your tomatoes are going to grow much bigger. They could get 5-6 feet, and that could present a problem to all the plants underneath it by shading out light. So you got to have enough light there to sustain your plants. And then different nutritional needs. Lettuce is going to go better with, a higher nitrogen content than tomatoes. If you grow tomatoes with a higher nitrogen content, you'll grow a lot of plants, but you won't produce good tomatoes because they'll put all the energy into just growing plants. So if you're going to do hydroponics, keep your varieties separate between tomatoes, cucumbers, your lettuces, things like that. You want to keep those separated. If you have big hydroponics units, you can grow big vegetables in there, like tomatoes. Tomatoes can grow up to 20 feet tall, depending on the variety. So I've been in tomato greenhouses where they just take and they keep folding the stems down and taking the leaves off, and those stems can be over 20 feet tall. And then you have to trellis them, way up in the air, and just there's a lot of management to that. But here on the bottom right, it shows the root system, how they look when they come out of the little plastic pots that are holding them. They're above the water. And those roots should look white like that. They should look white and healthy. That means they're taking up nutrition and they're healthy, and they'll be good. One of the things I learned when I was in the Netherlands, so the Netherlands has some of the highest grade hydroponics in the world, and they have greenhouses, hundreds of greenhouses just filled with hydroponics. And I'll show you some pictures from there. But it was really marvelous to see it. I asked a question. So we got to taste a number of different products, and they had a lot of different kind of vegetables they were growing, and they had herbs too. They had like mint and parsley, and they had turnips and rutabagas and lettuces, just an array of different vegetables. I didn't see any tomatoes in those. I've seen them in California though. But they had all these different things. And one of the things I'll mention is they tasted like a kohlrabi. A kohlrabi tasted like a kohlrabi, but it did not taste like a kohlrabi that would typically be grown outdoors. Anybody have any idea why? Silence. Okay, so
No.
the reason, go ahead.
No, I wouldn't have an idea.
Okay, so the reason, there's different flavor, and we want flavor in our vegetables. That's why lettuce is really successful, because lettuce doesn't have a lot of varying flavors. Flavor comes not just from water and proper nutrition. Flavor comes from other phytochemicals that are produced from the sun being outside, the wind blowing on it, that stimulation. So we all know, like chili peppers in New Mexico, we should know, like the hatch chili or chilies grown in a really hot area will have really intense heat. as opposed to chili, maybe it was grown in the shade, or it was grown in California, or it was grown in Michigan. They're going to have different flavor. Because if the climate's really mild and you supply all of the water and nutritional needs, you're going to get a great plant and it's going to produce, but the flavor might be different. In some cases, if the flavor is really a bitter type flavor, growing it hydroponically may be good because it won't be so bitter, or the flavor won't be as heightened where you don't want that kind of super intense flavor where you might find it objectionable. But you want to look at things like that, and if you were growing hydroponically outdoors, you're going to get probably better flavor than in a real protected area. So it's just something to consider. Will always be flavor, and I think we've looked at a lot of people have looked at like hydroponic tomatoes grown in a greenhouse. Now there's a company here in New Mexico that was doing that. And they had these beautiful red, gorgeous tomatoes grown hydroponically in a greenhouse. And I tasted it and I said, where's the flavor? I mean, it was pretty to look at. It was the most beautiful red color you ever saw, but it didn't have the flavor as compared to something that was produced outside under different conditions where you get those phytochemicals building up that enhance flavor. So, like I said, when I was in the Netherlands, they had mint, and mint tasted like mint, but it didn't taste like mint grown under New Mexico sun. I'll tell you that. And I bet the chili would have been the same way. But, if you look at like a green pepper, probably green pepper would be fine because we're not looking at the pungency heat for that. Now, looking at this on the top right, you're looking at light. So a lot of people think red, oh, well, you got to have red light or you got to have blue light. That seems to be like a buzz and a fad. And I shouldn't say it's a fad, but it's not necessary. So if you know what you're doing, the changing the color of light could be important, but it's not important really to go out and buy all these different colored lights and spend so much money on that. A straight LED full white spectrum light is like imitating, it's very close to sunlight. And that produces just as good a crops as you're going to get under artificial light. But some people like to play with the red and blue. So red can enhance tomato flowering and produce more tomatoes, but only if you know what you're doing. Blue will promote more vegetative growth. But again, only if you know what you're doing. So you can't have the blue on all the time. You can't have the red on all the time. So you have to be very careful about using the different colors of light. If you just want to grow something and you need light, if you're doing this in the house or you need to supplement more light, just use white light, white LED light. LED lights hardly take any energy to use. You can see the setups here about how the lighting was, the stand and the bottom right hand picture with a tote with a whole lot of holes drilled in that. Now you wouldn't put tomatoes in there for everyone, be way overcrowded. We usually only put 6 holes in that, but you can see how the light is. One of the things we're learning with when we teach hydroponics in the schools is that a lot of times, can you see my arrow?
Yes.
Okay, so this where the arrow is here, and you see the light right here. When they're tiny little seedlings, you want to move this down to just a few inches above the seedling so that they get enough light to be strong. They're getting too much light, they're going to burn, but you need to be down pretty close. And as the plant grows, you move it up, but you don't want to start out at the light being way up high. It's like being in a dimly lit room and the plant needs quite a bit of light. So in all the plants, as the plant grows, you never want the light too far away from the plant because the plant uses the light to photosynthesize in the presence of carbon dioxide and nutrition and water to make its carbohydrates to grow and produce the fruit or vegetable that you want to have. So keep the light close in hand. These were some of the components that we put it together. These simple tote box. We drilled the 6-hole, the net baskets to hold them in place. Hydrotone is just an expanded clay. You can use almost anything you just don't want things falling into the water and clogging everything up. Of course, the drill bits to drill the holes. This was a 3-inch boring saw so that we could put these 3-inch pots in there. Air tubes you can buy easily. So all this is available pretty easily most places to get if you're near Albuquerque or Las Cruces. A pH test kit if you need it. There are different forms of nutrition. So you can see this is a 216, a 054, a 501, 7410. That's one we used. And then another one here. So this one has no nitrogen. This one has no phosphorus. This one has very low phosphorus. Like I said, it all depends on what you're trying to grow. So this is just a kind of a general purpose. And there are different kinds, but these are designed for use in hydroponic systems. So they contain all the nutrition, including the micronutrients, for the most part, in them. There's this one also contains calcium and magnesium, which are important elements. So it's kind of hard to throw everything, all the elements together, because sometimes if you put calcium sulfate with some of the other elements, they can react with each other and form a solid. And you don't want that to happen. So that's chemistry. pH meters, aquarium air pump to keep the water going in here. This was just for initial single easy setup system. And you can see bubbler in here, bubbles away, the lights there, the roots grow, and you can produce. So lettuce is an easy one if you like to eat salads. You can harvest the outside leaves of a lettuce plant and let the center grow out again, and then harvest them, and you can get 3 or 4 harvests off that lettuce plant. If you were in it commercially, you could just take that whole lettuce plant out of that net pot and trim off the bottom, put it in like a baggie, and sell it to your neighbors as lettuce. And there you go. Again, some things. Here's another one outside. So, these totes, you want to kind of insulate them from our sun here. So not only would the water get hot, but the plastic is not UV stabilized on most totes. So it's going to photo degrade pretty fast. And so that'll crumble to pieces. So sometimes you can paint it over with a white paint that will resist the UV rays and bury the tote part way so it doesn't get too hot. And then you can have your setup system. So you can still grow outside using hydroponics. And all you have to do is check your water and nutrients in the solution here, and you can produce faster. It's always going to have the right amount of water for the plant to take up, and the nutrition, if you measure and do that, it'll always have that. And you could leave it for days without having to check. It depends on how hot it gets, because the plant's going to transpire and use the water pretty fast when it's 100 and some degrees. But easy to do outside. These were some of the systems they used in the Netherlands. So I'm going to show you this. So they used this kind of peat muck, and they formed it into the styrofoam trays that they recycled, and they kept using them over and over again. So they formed their own little pellets. So they didn't have a basket like the one on the left that was held. They had these floating rafts, and I'll be showing you that. So they had a machine that would kind of compress this peat moss into these little kind of like V sections here. And that's where they would grow radishes or different things. Underneath these peat little areas here is a hole. So the root can go through the hole and get into the nutrient solution. You can see they have some other different types where they have rows. This could be for radishes, and they seed it like this. But there's holes underneath for the radish to get the one root on the radish to get through and go down into the nutrient solution and take it up. But this way you can do smaller seeds and crops like small root crops, not carrots. Carrots require a little bit different system, but you could do the radishes, you could do turnips and rutabagas. And then you can see it germinating on the right. There's pressed plugs on a different one on the bottom right, again in the Netherlands. Here's those plugs kind of popped up. I'm not sure exactly why. I didn't get a chance to ask that. Why are these popped up like this? I don't know. But this was one of the systems they used here to get those plugs. So it's been a while. They had developed their own system here. So they were able to pull up these plugs. Oh, this machine, that's what it was. This is a seeding machine. So they had these trays on the bottom with the peat moss in them. And then this was an air machine. They put it underneath a seed area and it would suck up one seed and then it would drop it down here. So it would hold that seed and then they would just put this over the top and push a button, it would release the seed. And you can see some of these here, these floating wraps. There you can see the radishes on the bottom right. So they're floating in this nutrient solution underneath it. And here is the raised beds. So this is raised bed hydroponics that they made. So they got a steel frame. You can make them out of concrete. You can make out of cinder block. Find a way, you get a material, a PVC type material like for a pond and strap it down so it won't cave in on you. And then if you can have, either make them yourself, you can find styrofoam like this, or you'd have to buy them and you can recycle them. What they did was they would start the young plants at one end and then it just floats down this whole length. And I've got a bigger picture. You just keep floating it down. You keep starting at one end, floating it down. By the time it got to the far end, it was ready for harvest. And this is a small one that's easily done in a garden, but they had ones that were 20 feet across. So they had big machinery that would have to pick up these trays. So here's some of the bigger ones. This is for demonstration. Imagine all these trays just floating down here, seeding in the front, getting bigger as they go down, depending on what it was. And they change spacing on different things. So you could start out in the beginning with really tight spacing, then add other trays to it to increase the spacing till you get down and you get with a final spacing. But it just floats along there to the end. They did have some misting system up here, mainly because they do not have evaporative cooling or any other cooling system in the greenhouse. So to cool if it got too hot, they would just mist in the air or to raise humidity. And this is getting down to how some of the final product look. Now this is kind of staged, so it looks really pretty because they have big groups come in here and they can't allow big groups to go into their main sterile production areas. So they have this because it's real popular. So people like you and I or anybody can go in there and you can see how the production looks. But this is something that can be done in a backyard or under a hoop house. So if you have problems with hail or problems with dust, some of those things, you could create this and just build a simple hoop house to protect it. And you're still getting the sunlight. You still got the nutrient solution, but this nutrient solution you don't see here is actually recycled underneath there and aerated. So it moves along underneath here very slowly, but it is moving. But you look at the kind of production you're getting here, it's pretty amazing. You can see here that you look at these lettuces, they all look like perfect. And here on the bottom left, you can see them small as they start out and then just spaced out. So they have these other trays that have the right spacing on it. So they take this, they take the plugs out of here and they drop it into the next one where you see those little orange plugs. And then they just move it up and everything gets washed at the end after they harvest it and they can grow all these different crops. It's kind of like a conveyor belt, but it's something you can develop in your own garden at home. And it makes it fairly easy. But again, like I said, if you notice all these different lettuces, everything's pretty much the same size. You're not trying to grow a tomato or a corn stalk or cucumbers, none of that. Things need to be uniform to grow the same, and they all need to take the same nutrition, whatever's in that vat. So you can see how long they are, but isn't that beautiful? I mean, when you get really good sunlight on there, this is pretty amazing. And you can make a business of this. If you grow the right varieties, all you have to do is pull that up out of that nutrient solution, trim off the roots and drop it into a bag. And that's exactly what they were doing. They would take them up, trim the root off, and put it in a bag, and it went right to market within a couple hours. Here's some examples of like a hoop house, some simple setups. So your big investment will be your tank, probably a pump to circulate the water and nutrients, and those kind of inputs. But it can be done once you get that all set up. And you don't have to build the whole greenhouse all at once. You can do it, bits at a time. Here was one, I believe this was like maybe in Michigan. They were doing kind of that same technique I was talking about. But, without any screening, I can see holes in a lot of these vegetables. So cabbage loopers obviously got in there. So you can buy insect screening that can help, keep those insects out as well. Some other bigger operations, and you can operate this just in the summer or put plastic on, go part of the winter. Doing heat inputs on something like this can be expensive. Like as I worked in greenhouses, and winter heating is pretty expensive. Cooling is a little bit easier with shade. As long as the vegetable can take those higher temperatures, you shade it off, let the air free flow, it should be fine. Again, here's some outdoor production. You can see the big long trays of plants. It's proven it uses less water, recycling the nutrients, everything about it works out really well for backyard use. So you could do it indoors, you can do it outdoors, whatever way you want it. But again, I want to say don't mix fish and plants. Unless you're really an expert at it, you will be disappointed with killing one or the other. Your plants won't get enough nutrition or your fish will end up dying. I know more people that talk about all their fish die. So there you go. Does anybody have any questions?
If you guys have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself, or you can insert your questions in the chat box.
So, Mikhail, did you send out the manual, hydroponics manual?
So I'll do that after, and I was just going to share that right after if anyone had questions, but I can go ahead and go over it. So Jeff here went ahead and gave me a learning sort of module. Is that right?
Yeah. Mhm. It's
And kind of, yeah, okay. And it also came with kind of a worksheet expense. So it kind of gives you an idea where you can get these items and supplies. And it's coming from Walmart, Home Depot, and Lowe's. And so that information is going to be shared on our website platform under webinars and workshops, where we share all of our presenters' information. And if they're also coming from the main campus, from the university, or any of our presenters have any publications, then they can share that with us, and we share that information on our platform as well. So a lot of our specialists coming from New Mexico State University, you'll see a lot of their publications under our website. I'm going to say it again. It's under webinars and workshops. So you'll see their publications on there. You'll see their sort of recommendations of where they gather their resources and such. So this is going to be one of them, and I'll share that this week as well as our recording for today. So you should be expecting this recording to hit our Facebook on Friday, but that information will be on our website, like I said, this week.
It'd be interesting to see corn grown hydroponically. It can be a challenge sometimes to grow really good sweet corn. And
I
if you
was
can
gonna
grow
ask,
it outside
yeah.
and keep it from falling over, try to grow it hydroponic and keep it from growing over, you could give all the water and nutrition, because corn likes water and it likes nitrogen nutrition. So it'd be interesting.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you if you've maybe from your extension office, if you guys have grown corn from the hydroponics.
No,
Yeah.
you could grow anything. Like I said, technically you could grow anything. but it's, stabilizing. So I would imagine you'd have to build special like frameworks, like maybe a few pieces of rebar to keep the corn from getting blown over because it's just
Mhm.
floating in the water. But
Yeah.
it'd be interesting to see the kind of quality of corn you could produce on a small scale, at least.
Okay. Well, you have a question from George. Can you grow cacti and succulents?
In hydroponics, I would say no. I mean, technically you could for a short time, but at some point it's just too much. Why? I don't think anybody's really bothered to do it. Um, and why? I mean, the question would be why? Why would you do cactus in hydroponics? I mean, it's kind of funny. You could. Certain ones will, but for the most part, no.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you, George, for your question. Any questions that we have from our folks here from tonight? Shauna, thank you. It's an interesting presentation. Yep. Well, like I said, this week I will be sharing Jeff's information as well as the Learn by Doing curriculum base module. I did take a look at it, Jeff. It looks pretty good. I really like it. This is definitely something that I think I would recommend to some teachers here that are wanting to do gardening as well as those that are wanting to do a step forward just from hoop houses. And I know that some folks here from the schools, they've done hoop houses and they just want to know, like, okay, I built the hoop house, then what? Like, what do I want to do? So this is definitely a curriculum that I like to introduce to them. So it will hit by this Friday. It's a great overview of this lesson. It will talk about why a hydroponics, why do you want to go this route from building a hydroponic systems, what type of lighting and so forth. So I really like it and it will be on our website. So thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, there's, if you want to produce certain things like herbs,
Mm.
sometimes we want enough basil for the winter. It's a great way to produce, really good high quality basil and be able to harvest it really well and dry it and preserve it that way, or any of the other kind of herbs. So like in some of the intense gardening, you can produce quickly during your summer months so that you have a supply for the winter.
Nice. Maybe the next workshop that we can maybe do this in person because it would be very interesting to see, how everything is set up.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I can.
the sky's the limit. I mean, you could grow a redwood tree in there if you had a big enough container, but is it practical? That's the whole point.
Yeah.
That's why lettuce was deemed the most practical.
Well, I think we'll start with the most practical than the tree one first, but
Yes.
definitely that will be an eye-opening. But there are no other questions. We'll go ahead and end our session tonight. So with that being said, I am releasing our polls. So please, for those of you that are on here, I would really like your feedback. I just want to say thank you, Jeff, for coming on here and taking time out of your schedule to provide this presentation. And I look forward to working with you with the Yellowhorn presentation. So maybe next year we can start planning beginning of the year and see what your schedule look like, and we can squeeze you in for another webinar.
Okay. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're more than welcome to stick around. We're going to go ahead and share some of our upcoming events. So if you want to stay tuned, you can. If you want to, exit our Zoom session, you're more than welcome to. But thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for that. If you have any questions you want us to answer, you're more than welcome to send me an email. I had to connect via mobile because I just don't have the good signal right now. But I'm willing to answer any questions if you have like evaluative questions to let you know.
Okay. So thank you, everyone. I see that you guys are completing our polls. That's really helpful. Like I said from the beginning, if you have been here from the beginning, if you have any sort of additional comments as far as what you want to see more from us, it can be livestock related, it can be crop related, it can be garden related. Definitely add your suggestions in the comments. If you just put livestock, management, what type of livestock management are you like thinking of? Are you thinking about a Pacific in cattle or sheep or horses? Like what is there? So definitely add Pacifics in there if you are suggesting of crop production. What type of crop are you looking for? As well as gardening, soil amendments. Maybe go in depth in, just like what we had a presentation here today. We would like to see more of an in-person workshop on how to set up a hydroponic system, and even maybe include some herbs, like how he mentioned how you can grow herbs from the hydroponics. So definitely include all that comments and information. That really helps me, and it kind of gives me an idea for the upcoming year, what we can plan out for you guys. So thank you, everyone. And if you are not from the reservation, just go ahead and put down what county you're in. That kind of gives me also an idea of where all of our audience is coming from. I would really appreciate it. So for those of you that are still on here, we do have a livestock record keeping workshop, and this one is going to be taking place at White Horse Lake Chapter House. So not sure some of you guys on here are pretty, local in the Crown Point area, but if you are around, definitely swing by. This is going to be happening on November 6th, starting at 10 a.m. And we do have some booklets that are going to be distributed to our folks that are going to be participating in this workshop. We're going to show the producers who are participating what these record books are basically like. And it's called the New Mexico Farm and Ranch Record Calendar. It's good for any type of year. It has all the calendar months. It has, your income. You can also insert your sales receipts in each month, as well as any expenses, livestock expenses, crop expenses. What do you have as far as supplies that you have had to buy for your operation, and so forth. And you can also stick your sales of livestock in these cubbies, like what I would say, these receipt cubbies. But definitely we'll be sharing that information more during November 6th at White Horse Lake Chapter House. So we also have selection of replacement heifers webinar that we are going to be also having on November 6th. So there's 2 events going on the same day. And for all of you ranchers on here, this is a good presentation. I am really looking forward to it. So if you are a rancher on here and it's really that time of the year that we are selecting our replacement heifers, we want to know which heifers are going to be saved and which heifers are going to be, going to the auction. So definitely stay tuned. This is going to be presented by Mark Z. Johnson, and he is the Oklahoma State University Extension Beef Cattle Breeding Specialist. So he's going to be providing this presentation. And if you guys can go ahead and take out your phones, if this is what you're interested in, scan that QR code here on the flyer, and it'll take you directly to our registration page. And if you're unable to and you're using your phone to connect to this webinar, no worries. We also going to have this information on our website. So just head to nsa.nmsu.edu and it'll be under upcoming events. So those are the 2 events that we have so far for in-person workshop and our webinar. And I just briefly, introduced our conservation planning program. But if you are a producer that's located in, either Eastern or Northern Navajo agency, just to let you know that we provide assistance for technical services for ranchers and farmers here who are interested in getting their conservation planning out of the way. That's part of their packet to go towards renewal, their grazing permit renewal, or applying for a grazing permit here on the reservation. So we do this free of charge. So if this is something that you're interested in or want to have a workshop done, or just, want us to have provide a presentation overall what our conservation planning program is like, definitely let us know. And our information is here. So if you are wanting a workshop done as far as livestock related, crop related, garden, right there is my information. My name is Mikkel Silversmith, and I'm the project coordinator. And we also have Ms. Shirley Toth, who handles our conservation planning program, and her information is there as well. So we are on our Facebook, we have YouTube, all of our webinars recorded and posted on our YouTube channel at Navajo Sustainable Agriculture Project. And we also have our bi-monthly newsletter. With that being said, thank you everyone for tuning in for tonight, and we look forward to you guys attending our next webinar. So thank you everyone, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. So we're known as the Navajo Sustainable Agriculture Project. In short, we're called the NSA Project. We are funded by the USDA Outreach and Assistance for Native Farmers and Ranchers and Veteran Farmer and Ranchers Program. We collaborate a lot with our project partners, which you see, their logos are pretty much here. The Dene College Land Grant Office is one of them. And we also have COPE, which stands for Community Patient Outreach Patient Empowerment. So those are the two project partners that we really work closely as far as providing resources for producers wanting to kind of get more in depth in livestock management to crop management and even gardening expertise area. And not only those two partners that we collaborate with, but we also, invite some folks that are specialized in livestock and again, crops, entomology that are coming from the main campus out in New Mexico State University. So we work closely with all of these three entities. And moving forward, one of our main goals is obviously to help educate our producers in gathering resources to help them improve their operations, both profitability and sustainability. So we do deliver workshops based on the evaluations and reviews that we gather from our producers through webinars, which all of you on here that are pretty much familiar with our webinars, you always see polls at the end where we ask for your feedback to see, what are your experiences in hydroponics. You might have experiences before you have entered this webinar, or you may have zero idea what hydroponics is and how it can be implemented in your backyard. And we like to hear that feedback from you, as well as other feedback that you'd like to share that you want to see more from our project. So definitely, share that type of information. You can go in depth and say, like, this is what we're lacking here as far as resources. And we definitely, want to know more about hydroponics in a maybe in-person setting. Let me know about that. So any type of topics that you want as far as webinar topics, feel free to put that information in there in the polls at the end of this presentation. And as well as workshops, in-person workshops. We're pretty much out there now working with land boards and grazing officials and farm boards. And presenting all types of livestock management type of workshops, I should say, for these folks. So currently, we've been conducting workshops in person on livestock record keeping, sheep and goat vaccinations, cattle marketing. During these workshops and webinars, we always want to appreciate our project partners, the Ned College Land Grant Office and COPE and NMSU CES specialists who assist us in developing these ag-related workshops for our producers. Another goal of ours is to increase our producers' knowledge of USDA programs. We definitely make aware of these NRCS and FSA programs here locally, both in San Juan, McKinley County, and Cibola County. So we do ag resource fairs every year online virtually, and we have the local field offices present on what type of local programs that their local farmers and ranchers can apply for. So definitely we look forward to another year for 2025 for maybe taking it further and having in-person sessions. So that would be great. And we also, not to mention NSA Project has a conservation planning program that we offer that is in collaboration with the Nate College Land Grant Office. So we have our project resource specialist, Miss Shirley Toth, and several of our resource technicians assist ranchers and farmers both in Eastern and Northern Navajo agencies by helping them develop a basic conservation plan. And we also provide surveys for them. If they are familiar with any of the USDA programs, like you see here from NRCS, FSA, rural development, risk management agencies, and we can help and assist in those producers in delivering them to their local field offices and share with them, this is type of, what are you looking for as far as, drought loss assistance or even crop disaster assistance and applying for EQIP through NRCS and so forth. Another goal is increase the local production and consumption of fresh fruits and vegetables and healthy foods by Navajo families and individuals. For our gardening projects, we have used, like I said, the expertise from COPE and as well as the LGO office and our folks coming from the NMSU campus. They have provided a lot of great presentations from food preservations that we had recently on canning salsas, from starting water bath, food preservations on, I believe it was jellies, jams and jellies we had. Then we also have garden planning and seed selection. We also had garden soil amendments that, Dr. Walker from NMSU have delivered and so much more. So definitely we do have a website that is up on our NMSU page. So if you want, I'll go ahead and share that information towards the end of this session and you guys can look us up, and I'll share more of what other upcoming events that we have.